The cabin door explodes inward. Guards flood the space, weapons drawn, searching for their missing king. He lies bleeding on the floor, but beside him kneels a stranger, an Omega, covered in his blood. The lead guard's hand moves to her blade. Step away from him. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The snow had turned from a light dusting to a blinding whiteout in less than an hour, and Cassandra Reed knew she was going to die out here. Her fingers had gone numb inside her worn gloves 2 hours ago. Her feet were blocks of ice in boots that had seen better days, and every breath felt like inhaling shards of glass into her lungs. She'd been traveling through neutral territory for 3 days, trying to reach the southern settlements where she hoped to find work, any work that would keep her from starving through the winter. But the storm had come out of nowhere, and now she was lost, disoriented, and rapidly losing the will to keep moving forward. Just a little rest, her exhausted mind whispered. Just sit down for a moment, close your eyes. The cold won't hurt anymore if you just stop fighting it. She stumbled over something hidden beneath the snow and went down hard, her palms scraping against frozen ground. For a long moment, she just stayed there on her hands and knees, too tired to get up, too cold to care. This was it. This was where her pathetic story would end. Not with family mourning her loss, not with friends remembering her kindly, but alone in a snowstorm, forgotten before she'd ever been known. The sound that reached her ears didn't make sense at first. It was too weak, too animal, too desperate to be real. A whimper, low and pained, coming from somewhere ahead of her. Cassandra lifted her head, squinting through the driving snow. There, partially buried in a drift against an outcropping of rock, was the largest wolf she had ever seen. Its fur was dark, almost black, matted with ice, and what looked like blood. As she watched, it tried to lift its head and failed, collapsing back into the snow with another pitiful sound. Every rational instinct told her to walk away. She was barely surviving herself. She had no supplies, no strength, no reason to risk what little life she had left trying to save a dying animal. The wolf was probably beyond help anyway. But even as her mind listed all the logical reasons to leave it, Cassandra found herself crawling forward through the snow. Her grandmother had always said she was too soft-hearted for her own good, that compassion would be her downfall. Looking at this magnificent creature, dying alone in the storm, she couldn't bring herself to care about being sensible. When she reached the wolf, she could see the extent of its injuries more clearly. Deep gashes across its side, possibly from a fight with another predator. Its breathing was shallow and labored, each exhale sending small puffs of condensation into the freezing air. The animal was dying, and it knew it. Those intelligent eyes, an unusual shade of amber that seemed almost gold, tracked her approach with what looked like resignation. "You're too big for me to carry," Cassandra said, her voice hoarse from cold and disuse. "But I can't leave you here. I won't leave you here." She had no idea if the wolf could understand her, but talking made her feel less alone, less like she was about to die alongside a stranger in the wilderness. She shrugged out of her coat, immediately regretting it as the wind hit her like a physical blow and draped it over the wolf's massive body. It wasn't much, barely covered half of the creature, but it was something. Then she positioned herself against the rock outcropping, using her own body as a windbreak, and began the slow process of trying to warm them both. The wolf made a sound that might have been protest or gratitude. She couldn't tell which. Its eyes closed, and for a terrifying moment she thought it had died. But no, she could still see the slight rise and fall of its chest, could feel the faint warmth of its breath against her frozen hands. "Stay with me," she whispered, pulling the wolf's massive head onto her lap, despite knowing how dangerous this was. "You stay with me, and I'll stay with you. We'll survive this together or not at all." She had no supplies to treat the wounds, no way to build a fire in this wind, nothing but her own failing body heat and stubborn refusal to let death take them both without a fight. So she held the wolf close, wrapped what remained of her coat around them both, and began to talk. She told it about growing up in the Clearwater Pack, about her parents who had died when she was young, leaving her to be raised by an aunt who viewed her as an obligation rather than family. She told it about presenting as an Omega at 16 and immediately being seen as little more than breeding stock by the pack alphas. She told it about the beta they'd tried to match her with, a cruel man twice her age who'd made it clear he viewed her as property to be used and discarded. She told it about running, about choosing freezing to death in the wilderness over a lifetime of abuse. And through it all, the wolf's eyes would occasionally crack open, fixing on her face with that same intense intelligence as if it understood every word and was memorizing them for later. The first night was the worst. Cassandra drifted in and out of consciousness, unsure if she was dreaming or dying, or some combination of both. The wolf's breathing would sometimes stop for terrifying seconds before resuming with a shuddering gasp. She found herself checking constantly, pressing her ear to the creature's chest, counting heartbeats like prayers. When dawn finally came, gray and dim through the still falling snow, she was shocked to discover they'd both survived. The storm had lessened slightly, enough that she could see more than a few feet ahead. The wolf was still breathing, still alive against all odds, and she, somehow, was also still conscious despite the cold that had settled deep into her bones. "We made it through one night," she told the wolf, her voice barely more than a croak. "Let's see if we can make it through another." She knew she needed to move, needed to find better shelter and food and warmth, but the wolf couldn't travel, could barely lift its head, and Cassandra found she couldn't abandon it, not after they'd survived the night together. So instead, she began the painstaking process of trying to improve their situation. She scooped away snow to create a small depression in the drift, using her body and the rock to form a crude shelter. She packed snow around the edges to create walls that might block some of the wind. It wasn't much, but it was better than being completely exposed. The wolf watched her work, those golden eyes tracking her every movement. There was something unnerving about that gaze, too human, too aware. Several times she caught herself talking to it like it was a person rather than an animal. "I know you're in pain," she said as she worked. "I wish I had something to help with that. Medicine, bandages, anything. But all I have are my hands and my voice, so I guess that will have to be enough." By midday, exhaustion and hunger were making her lightheaded. She'd had nothing to eat in over 24 hours, and the constant shivering was burning through what little energy reserves she had left. But when she looked at the wolf, saw how its breathing had strengthened slightly, how it was watching her with what almost looked like gratitude, she found the will to keep going. The second night was somehow worse than the first. The temperature dropped even further, and Cassandra's body began to shut down in stages. First her toes went completely numb, then her fingers. She couldn't feel her face anymore, couldn't stop her teeth from chattering. But she kept talking to the wolf, kept sharing her warmth, kept holding on. "I had a dream once," she whispered into the darkness, "a stupid, childish dream that I'd find someone who would love me for myself, not for being an Omega or for what I could give them, someone who would see me as more than just my designation." She laughed bitterly. "My aunt said I was a fool. That dreams like that were for storybooks, not real life." Maybe she was right. Maybe this is where all foolish dreamers end up, freezing to death in the middle of nowhere. The wolf made a sound, low and rumbling, and shifted slightly so more of its body was pressed against hers. Even injured and dying, it was trying to share what little warmth it had. The gesture made tears freeze on her cheeks. "Thank you," she breathed, "for keeping me company at the end, for making me feel less alone." Morning came again, impossibly. Cassandra woke to find herself curled around the wolf, her arms wrapped tightly around its massive form, her face buried in its fur. For a moment, she thought she was dead, and this was some kind of afterlife, because surely they couldn't have survived another night. But no. She could feel pain returning to her extremities as blood flow resumed, could hear her own heart pounding weakly in her chest. The storm had finally broken. Weak sunlight filtered through gaps in the clouds, and the wind had died to almost nothing. And the wolf, incredibly, was still breathing. Its wounds looked worse in the daylight, crusty with dried blood and possibly infected, but its eyes were alert when they opened. Those golden eyes fixed on her face, and Cassandra could have sworn she saw recognition there, gratitude, something almost human. "We have to move," she told it, struggling to sit up. "I need to find food, water, something to treat your wounds. If we stay here, we'll both die." But when she tried to stand, her legs wouldn't support her weight. She collapsed back into the snow, frustration and despair warring in her chest. She'd kept them both alive for 2 days, only to be too weak to save them now. The wolf made a decision then. She saw it happen, saw something shift in those intelligent eyes. It struggled to its feet, swaying dangerously, but refusing to fall. Then it lowered its massive head and gently grasped the back of her coat in its teeth. "What are you doing?" Cassandra gasped as the wolf began to pull her. "You're injured. You can't." But the wolf ignored her protests. With strength that should have been impossible given its wounds, it began dragging her through the snow. Not randomly, she realized, after a few minutes. It was taking her somewhere specific, following a path only it could sense. They traveled for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one. The wolf would stop occasionally to rest, its breathing labored, its legs trembling with exertion. But each time Cassandra tried to insist they stop, that it was doing too much, those golden eyes would fix on her with such determination that she fell silent. Finally, they emerged into a clearing where an abandoned hunting cabin sat half buried in snow. The wolf pulled her right up to the door, then collapsed, its energy finally spent. Cassandra dragged herself forward and shouldered the door open. Inside was dusty and cold, but blessedly sheltered from the wind. There was even a fireplace with a small stack of wood someone had left behind. "Get inside," she urged the wolf. "Come on, just a little further." The wolf managed to crawl over the threshold before collapsing again. Cassandra shut the door against the cold, then set about building a fire with fingers that barely functioned. It took 3 tries to get the kindling lit, but finally flames caught and began spreading warmth through the small space. Once the fire was established, she turned her attention to the wolf. Its breathing had become labored again, and fresh blood seeped from its wounds. She had no medical supplies, no clean bandages, nothing but melted snow for water and the meager heat from the fire. "I'm going to try to clean these," she warned, not sure why she bothered explaining her actions to an animal. "It's going to hurt." The wolf's eyes met hers, and she could have sworn it was giving her permission. As gently as possible, she began washing away the dried blood, revealing the true extent of the damage. The wounds were deep, clearly from another animal, possibly territorial wolves or a bear. They needed stitches, antibiotics, proper medical care. All she could offer was clean water and hope. "I'm sorry," she whispered, as the wolf flinched under her ministrations. "I'm so sorry I can't do more." To her shock, the wolf pressed its muzzle against her hand briefly, a gesture that felt like forgiveness, like trust. She worked through the night, keeping the fire fed, checking the wolf's breathing, trying to will it to survive through sheer force of determination. And somewhere in those quiet hours, As she sat beside this magnificent creature that had saved her life by dragging her to shelter, Cassandra realized something. She wasn't ready to die. She'd been so beaten down by her pack, so convinced she had no value, that she'd been ready to let the cold take her. But these last 3 days, fighting for both their lives, had reminded her of something important. She was stronger than she'd believed. She was worthy of survival. She was more than what others had told her she was. The wolf seemed to sense her change of heart. Its eyes opened in the firelight, watching her with that unnerving intelligence. "You saved me," Cassandra said softly, "not just from the storm, from giving up, from believing I deserved to die alone and forgotten." She reached out carefully and rested her hand on the wolf's head. "Thank you for that." For 3 days she'd been dragging this wounded wolf through her own private hell, and somehow, impossibly, they'd both survived. Morning came, and with it, a sound that made Cassandra's blood run cold. Voices outside the cabin, multiple voices, calling out in an organized search pattern. The wolf's head lifted sharply, its ears perking forward. Then it did something that made Cassandra's world tilt on its axis. It began to shift. She'd seen wolves shift before, of course. She'd grown up around shifters. But she'd never seen anything like this. The transformation was smooth, powerful, accompanied by a surge of energy that made the very air crackle. Within seconds, where the massive wolf had lain bleeding and dying, there was now a man. Not just any man. The most beautiful man Cassandra had ever seen. He was tall, powerfully built even while injured, with dark hair and strong features that would have been intimidating if not for the warmth in those same golden eyes. Those same eyes that had watched her for 3 days, that had seen her at her most vulnerable, that held recognition and something deeper she couldn't name. Cassandra breathed, "you're not a wolf. I mean, you are, but you're also." He cut off her stammered words with a slight smile that transformed his face. "My name is Rhys Ashford. I'm the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. And you," he continued, his voice rough from disuse but carrying unmistakable authority, "are the woman who saved my life, who kept me alive for 3 days despite being barely able to keep herself alive, who talked to me like I mattered, who shared every thought and fear and dream without knowing I could understand every word." Cassandra felt heat flood her face as she remembered everything she'd said, every confession she'd made, thinking she was talking to a dying animal. "You heard all of that." "Every word," Rhys confirmed. "And I need you to know something, Cassandra." The way he said her name made something in her chest clench. "When you found me dying in that snow, when you chose to stay with me instead of saving yourself, something extraordinary happened. The mate bond formed between us." She stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "That's not possible. I'm nobody. I'm just an Omega who ran away from her pack. I can't be mated to a king." "The bond doesn't care about titles or status," Rhys said gently. "It cares about souls recognizing each other. And my soul recognized yours the moment you knelt beside me in the snow and said you wouldn't let me die alone." Before Cassandra could respond, the door burst open and wolves in human form poured into the cabin, all wearing expressions of relief and concern. Their eyes went immediately to Rhys, then to the blood, then to Cassandra. "Your Majesty," a tall woman with silver-streaked hair gasped. "Thank the goddess. We've been searching for 3 days." "We thought." The cabin was suddenly full of activity. Healers rushed forward to examine Rhys's wounds. Guards secured the perimeter. Someone wrapped Cassandra in a warm cloak. But through it all, Rhys's eyes never left her face. "Everyone out," he commanded, his voice carrying alpha authority that made every wolf in the room stop instantly. "Give us a moment. But, sir, your wounds. Your Majesty, we need to brief you." "But, Your Majesty," the woman who appeared to be the lead healer began. "I set out." The command left no room for argument. One by one, the guards and healers filed out, though Cassandra could hear them gathering just outside the door. When they were alone again, Reese turned back to her. I know this is overwhelming. I know you have questions and fears and probably think this is some kind of mistake. But Cassandra, I need you to understand something. Those 3 days we spent together, you showed me who you are when no one important is watching. You're kind, courageous, selfless. You put a dying stranger before your own survival. That's not weakness. That's extraordinary strength. I'm not strong, Cassandra whispered. I'm the one who ran away from her pack, the one who couldn't fight back against what they wanted to do to me. You survived, Reese interrupted firmly. You chose a slim chance at freedom over certain abuse. That took more courage than most wolves possess. He shifted slightly, wincing as his wounds protested, but his eyes remained intense on hers. I'm not asking you to accept the mate bond right now. I'm not asking you to make any decisions while you're exhausted and overwhelmed, but I am asking you to come with me. Let my healers care for you. Give yourself time to recover and think, and when you're ready, when you've had time to process everything, we'll talk about what comes next. What if I can't do this? Cassandra asked, voicing her deepest fear. What if I'm not capable of being what you need? Then we'll figure it out together, Reese said simply, but I think you're going to surprise yourself. The healers burst back in before Cassandra could respond, insisting that Reese needed immediate treatment. As they worked, Cassandra found herself being examined by another healer, a kind older woman who clucked her tongue at the frostbite on Cassandra's fingers and toes. You're lucky to be alive, dear, the woman said. Another day in that storm, and we'd have lost you both. Cassandra watched as they tended to Reese's wounds, watched him bear the pain stoically while his eyes kept drifting back to her. The mate bond, she could feel it now, a warm thread connecting them. It was nothing like she'd imagined. It didn't feel constraining or demanding. It felt like coming home to a place she'd never been, but had always been searching for. The journey to Reese's territory took 2 days, with both of them riding in a covered wagon while they recovered from their ordeal. Cassandra expected awkwardness, expected the reality of their situation to create distance. Instead, they talked, really talked, about everything and nothing. Reese told her about growing up as crown prince, about the pressure and loneliness of leadership. He told her about his mother, who died giving birth to him, leaving him to be raised by a father who loved him, but struggled to show it. He told her about ascending to the throne at 25 when his father was killed defending their territory. He told her about the weight of responsibility, the constant political maneuvering, the way everyone wanted something from him. I've spent my entire life surrounded by people, he said on the second morning, and yet I've been profoundly alone. No one sees me, Cassandra. They see the title, the power, what I can do for them. But when I was lying there as a wolf, wounded and dying, you saw me, just me. You talked to me about dreams and fears and hopes like I was someone worth knowing. That's why, she realized, you didn't tell me who you were immediately. You wanted to hear what I'd say when I thought you were just a dying wolf. Reese looked slightly sheepish. I know that might seem manipulative, but it's not, Cassandra interrupted. I understand. Everyone wants something from you, but I didn't know who you were, so I just talked. I was honest because I thought I was dying and it didn't matter anymore. It mattered to me, Reese said softly. Every word mattered. When they finally arrived at the northern palace, Cassandra couldn't contain her gasp. It was magnificent, built into the side of a mountain with towers that seemed to touch the sky. Wolves in human form moved through the courtyards with purpose and organization. Everyone stopped when they saw Reese's wagon, dropping into respectful bows. This is your home now, Reese said, noting her overwhelmed expression. If you choose it. I know it's grand and intimidating, but it's also filled with good people who will welcome you. I don't know how to be a queen, Cassandra whispered. Neither did I, When I became king? Reese replied with a slight smile. We learned together. The rooms they gave her were larger than her entire living space in the Clearwater Pack had been. A massive bed dominated the space, covered in soft furs and fine linens. A fireplace crackled with warmth. Windows overlooked the mountains, showing vistas that took her breath away. A team of servants appeared, offering her a bath, food, clean clothes, everything she could possibly need. But the moment they left her alone, Cassandra found herself overwhelmed. She sank onto the edge of the bed, trying to process everything that had happened in the span of 5 days. She'd gone from preparing to die in a storm to being the potential mate of the most powerful alpha in existence. It was too much, too fast. A knock on her door made her start. When she called permission to enter, Reese stepped inside. He'd been cleaned up, his wounds properly bandaged, wearing fresh clothes that emphasized his powerful build. But it was his eyes that captured her attention, those same golden eyes that had watched her with such intensity when he was a wolf. I'm not supposed to be here, he said. My advisors think I should give you space, but I needed to check on you, to make sure you're okay. I don't know if I'm okay, Cassandra admitted. This is all happening so fast. I know, and I'm sorry for that. If I could slow it down, give you more time, I would. But there are things you need to know. He moved further into the room, maintaining a respectful distance. When I was attacked 3 days ago, it wasn't random. There are wolves who don't want a king, who want to return to the old ways of independent packs constantly warring with each other. They sent assassins after me. Cassandra felt ice form in her stomach. So, when you were injured, you were left to die in that storm because my own guards were killed or scattered. Those wolves hunting for me weren't trying to save me. They were making sure I was dead. And I would have been, if not for you. That's why I need you to understand. The mate bond isn't just personal, it's political. The moment I declare you my mate, you become a target. Anyone who wants to hurt me will try to hurt you. So I'm not asking you to accept the bond without understanding the risks. Fear should have consumed her. The old Cassandra, the one who'd run from her pack rather than fight, would have been terrified. But something had changed in her during those 3 days in the snow. She'd discovered a strength she hadn't known she possessed. If I accept, she said slowly, will you teach me to protect myself? Will you help me become strong enough to face threats? Every day, Reese promised. I'll train you personally. You'll never be helpless again. And the mate bond, she continued. If I accept it, will you give me time to grow into being queen? Or will you expect me to be perfect immediately? I'll give you all the time you need, Reese said. I'll stand beside you while you learn, support you when you stumble, and celebrate every victory. You won't be alone in this, Cassandra. I'll be your partner, not your master. Cassandra stood and moved closer to him, studying his face in the firelight. 3 days ago, I thought I was going to die. I'd given up on life, on dreams, on everything. You know what kept me going? What made me fight to keep us both alive? He shook his head, waiting. It was talking to you, telling you all my secrets and dreams. I felt less alone than I had in years, even though I thought you were just a wolf who couldn't understand. But you did understand. You heard everything and you still want me. That means something. It means everything, Reese breathed. So here's what I propose, Cassandra said, feeling more certain with each word. I'll accept the mate bond. I'll try to be your queen. But I need you to be patient with me. I need time to adjust, to learn, to become someone who can stand beside you instead of behind you. Take all the time you need, Reese said. I've waited my entire life to find my mate. I can wait longer for you to be ready. Cassandra smiled, feeling something like hope bloom in her chest. Then yes, I accept you, Reese Ashford. I choose you, choose us, choose this life we might build together. The mate bond flared between them as she spoke the words of acceptance, blazing, warm, and bright. Rhys pulled her carefully into his arms, mindful of both their healing injuries, and rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for saving me in every way a person can be saved." The formal mating ceremony was held 1 week later, giving Cassandra time to recover from her frostbite and adjust to her new life. The palace was transformed for the occasion, decorated with winter flowers and glowing candles. Wolves from every major pack in the northern territories came to witness their king claim his mate. Cassandra stood in her chambers, wearing a dress that had been specially made for her in shades of ice blue and silver that complemented her light hair and pale skin. She barely recognized herself in the mirror. A month ago, she'd been a nobody Omega running for her life. Now, she was about to become queen. "You look beautiful," said a voice from the doorway. Cassandra turned to find a woman about her age with kind eyes and an easy smile. "I'm Lyra, one of Rhys's chief advisors. He sent me to check if you needed anything before the ceremony." "I need to not pass out from nerves," Cassandra admitted. Lyra laughed. "Understandable. But I think you should know something. I've served Rhys for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Whatever you're worried about, whatever you think you might lack, he sees past it to who you really are." "What if I fail? What if I can't be what he needs?" "Then you'll learn and grow and try again," Lyra said simply. "That's all anyone can do. But Cassandra, I've seen the reports of what happened. You kept the king alive for 3 days in a blizzard with nothing but your own body heat and determination. You dragged a wounded wolf through snow for miles. You survived when any reasonable person would have given up. That's not the behavior of someone who's going to fail." The ceremony itself was breathtaking. Cassandra walked through the great hall toward where Rhys waited, and every eye was on her. She could hear whispers, knew that many were questioning whether a nobody Omega was worthy of their king. But when her eyes met Rhys's, when she saw the absolute certainty and warmth in his gaze, the doubts faded. He believed in her. That would have to be enough. The vows were traditional, spoken in the old language that had been used for centuries. But when it came time for Rhys to mark her, to place his bite on her neck in front of all these witnesses, he paused. He leaned close so only she could hear and whispered, "Are you absolutely certain? There's no going back after this?" She thought about the girl who'd been ready to die in a snowstorm, the girl who'd thought she had no value, no purpose. That girl was gone, transformed by 3 days of fighting for survival, by discovering she was stronger than she'd ever known. "I'm certain," she whispered back. "I choose you. I choose us. I choose this life." The bite sent shockwaves through her body, the mate bond solidifying into something permanent and unbreakable. She marked him in return, claiming him as thoroughly as he'd claimed her. And when they turned to face the assembled crowd as king and queen, mates bound for life, Cassandra felt something she'd never experienced before. She felt like she belonged. The feast that followed was overwhelming. Cassandra met dozens of pack leaders, answered countless questions, accepted congratulations from wolves who'd been strangers hours before. Rhys stayed close, his presence a constant reassurance, guiding her through the social intricacies with patience and subtle prompts. It wasn't until late in the evening, when they finally escaped to a private balcony for air, that she could breathe again. "How do you do that all the time?" she asked, leaning against the railing. "All the people, all the politics, all the performing?" "You get used to it," Rhys said, coming to stand beside her. "And it's easier when you have someone to face it with." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "I meant what I said, Cassandra. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be yourself. That's all I want, all I need." She looked up at him, this powerful alpha who could have had anyone, who'd chosen her. "Why me?" she asked. Out of all the wolves in all the territories, why did the mate bond form with me?" "Because you were exactly what I needed," Reese said. "Someone genuine, someone kind, someone who would see past the crown to the man underneath, someone brave enough to drag a dying wolf through a blizzard for 3 days without asking for anything in return. Someone strong enough to survive the kind of life I'm asking you to share." "You say I'm strong," Cassandra said, "but I'm still afraid. Afraid of failing you, failing the pack, failing myself." "Then we'll face those fears together," Reese said, pulling her close. "You're not alone anymore, Cassandra. Whatever comes, whatever challenges we face them as partners, as mates, as equals." She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the mate bond warm and steady between them. This man who'd been a dying wolf when she found him was now her husband, her partner, her future. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt right. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly, "about the 3 days we spent together." Reese's arms tightened around her. "You can tell me anything. When I was talking to you, when I thought you were just a wolf, I wasn't just rambling to pass time, I was saying goodbye. I'd decided that freezing to death alone was better than the life I'd left behind. I was ready to give up. But then I found you, and suddenly I had a reason to fight. Keeping you alive gave me purpose, made me remember that I was worth something, even if just as a person who wouldn't let another creature die alone." Reese pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "You saved me in more ways than just keeping me alive. Do you know what I was doing when those assassins attacked? I was on a scouting mission, alone, because I was tired of always being surrounded by guards and advisors. I was being reckless, foolish, and when they left me dying in that snow, part of me thought maybe it was fitting. Maybe this was how it should end, alone and forgotten. But then you found me, and you refused to let me give up. You talked to me about dreams and courage and surviving. You reminded me why I became king in the first place. To protect wolves like you, wolves who deserve better than the cruelty and abuse that passes for normal in so many packs. So maybe we saved each other," Cassandra said. "Maybe that's what the mate bond recognized. 2 people who needed to find each other to remember why life was worth living." Reese kissed her then, soft and sweet, full of promise for their future together. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "Come to bed," he said. "Not for." Cassandra felt heat flood her face at the unspoken offer, but Reese continued gently. "Just to hold each other, to be together without all the politics and ceremony and performance. Just Reese and Cassandra, 2 people who survived a blizzard together." "That sounds perfect," she said. Their chambers were warm and private, the massive bed inviting after the endless day. They helped each other out of their formal clothes, Reese being careful with the laces of her dress, Cassandra fumbling with the complicated fastenings of his royal attire. There was something intimate about it, this quiet domesticity after all the ceremony. When they finally slipped under the covers, Reese pulled her close, and Cassandra felt safe in a way she never had before. His body was warm and solid against hers, his arms strong and protective. The mate bond hummed contentedly between them, no longer just a thread, but a living thing that wrapped around both their hearts. "Tell me a story," Reese murmured into her hair, "like you did when we were in the snow. Tell me about your dreams, your fears, everything you think about when you're alone." So Cassandra talked, sharing her thoughts about the day, her worries about being queen, her hopes for their future. And Reese listened with the same intensity he'd shown when he was a wolf, making her feel heard and valued. When she finally ran out of words, he began sharing his own thoughts, his own fears about being a good king, a good mate, a good man. The intimacy of it was more profound than anything physical could have been. This was trust, vulnerability, two souls opening to each other completely. As sleep began to claim her, Cassandra whispered one last thought. I'm glad I found you in that storm. I'm glad I was stubborn enough to refuse to let either of us die. Me too, Rhys breathed against her temple. Me too. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Cassandra began intensive training in pack politics, history, diplomacy, everything a queen needed to know. Rhys's advisors were patient but thorough, filling her days with lessons. But Rhys had also kept his promise about teaching her to protect herself. Every morning before dawn, he took her to the training grounds and taught her to fight. It wasn't enough to know politics, he'd explained. She needed to be able to defend herself if threats came. The first few sessions were humiliating. Cassandra was weak from years of suppression in her old pack, untrained, uncertain. She spent more time on her back in the dirt than standing, but Rhys never made her feel foolish. He simply helped her up, corrected her form, and encouraged her to try again. You're getting stronger, he told her after 2 weeks. I can see the difference already. Cassandra wiped sweat from her forehead, exhausted but exhilarated. I still can't beat you. You're not supposed to beat me, Rhys said with a slight smile. I've been training since I could walk, but you're learning to protect yourself, to think strategically, to use your opponent's strength against them. That's what matters. As the training continued, Cassandra felt herself changing. Her body grew stronger, her reflexes quicker. But more than that, her confidence grew. She was learning she could fight, could defend herself, could be more than just an omega waiting to be protected. The political training was harder, in many ways. Learning to navigate the complex web of pack alliances, territorial disputes, and traditional hierarchies was exhausting. But Lyra was a patient teacher, explaining the history behind each custom, the reasons for each protocol. One afternoon, about a month into her training, Cassandra was studying pack genealogies when Lyra asked an unexpected question. Have you thought about what kind of queen you want to be? Cassandra looked up, confused. What do you mean? I mean, Lyra explained, you have an opportunity to shape this role. Rhys is a progressive king. He's open to change. You don't have to be like the queens before you. You can create something new. What would you change? Cassandra asked, curious. Lyra's expression turned serious. The treatment of omegas, for one. In many packs, they're still seen as lesser. As property, you could advocate for reforms, protections. You've lived that reality. You know what needs to change. The idea took root in Cassandra's mind. She'd spent so long being a victim that she'd never considered she might be in a position to help others. But, as queen, she could actually make a difference. That evening, she brought the idea to Rhys. What would you think about implementing protections for omegas across all packs under our authority? She asked, making it illegal to force matings, to abuse or control omegas based solely on their designation? Rhys looked at her with such pride that it made her chest tight. I think it's brilliant. I think it's exactly the kind of thing we need. Tell me more. They spent hours discussing possibilities, drafting ideas, considering implementation strategies. Rhys's enthusiasm matched her own, and Cassandra realized this was why the mate bond had formed. They weren't just compatible romantically. They were compatible in purpose, in values, in their vision for what their kingdom could become. Over the following months, they began implementing reforms. Not radical overnight changes that would spark rebellion, but steady, consistent pressure toward better treatment of all wolves, regardless of designation. Some pack leaders resisted, clinging to old ways, but Rhys was firm, and having Cassandra stand beside him, sharing her own story, made the reforms real in a way proclamations couldn't. She spoke to groups of omegas in various packs, listening to their stories, advocating for their rights. She trained with female guards, showing that omegas could be strong. She sat in on political negotiations, proving she could navigate complex discussions. Slowly, steadily, she grew into the role of queen. But it wasn't all politics and training. There were quiet evenings with Rhys, sharing meals and conversation. There were nights tangled together, learning each other's bodies, discovering what made the other gasp and moan. The physical intimacy grew alongside the emotional, each feeding the other, until Cassandra couldn't imagine her life without him. 6 months after the mating ceremony, Cassandra woke to find Rhys watching her in the early morning light. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. I was just thinking about the day I found you." "Or you found me," Cassandra said, propping herself up on one elbow. Still not sure which. "I'm sure," Rhys said. "You found me. And in doing so, you saved not just my life, but my purpose. You reminded me why I wanted to be king, and now you're teaching me how to be a better one." Cassandra felt tears prick at her eyes. "We're teaching each other." She reached up to trace the mark on his neck, the mate bite that mirrored the one on her own. 3 days I dragged a wounded wolf through the snow, thinking I was just trying to keep us both alive. I had no idea I was dragging my future, my purpose, my entire life toward me. Best 3 days of suffering either of us ever experienced, Rhys joked, then grew serious. But truly, Cassandra, I know the path here wasn't easy. I know you've struggled and doubted and feared. But watching you grow into this role, seeing you discover your own strength, it's been the greatest privilege of my life. You're an amazing queen. "I'm trying," Cassandra said. "Every day, I'm trying to be worthy of this position, of you, of the wolves who look to us for leadership." "You already are worthy," Rhys said firmly. "You were worthy the moment you chose compassion over self-preservation. The moment you refused to let a dying stranger suffer alone. Everything since then has just been the world catching up to what I already knew. That you're extraordinary." Cassandra kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. When they broke apart, she said, "I need to tell you something." Rhys's expression turned attentive. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." For a moment, Rhys simply stared at her. Then joy exploded across his face. "You're certain?" "The healer confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to be sure before I told you." She placed her hand over her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a child." Rhys pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. This is everything. You've given me everything, Cassandra. We've given each other everything," she corrected, happy tears flowing freely now. Later that day, they announced the pregnancy to the court. The celebration was immediate and genuine. Cassandra stood beside Rhys, his arm around her waist, and looked out at the gathered wolves. These were her people now. This was her pack, her family, her home. As the festivities continued around them, Cassandra found herself thinking about the girl she'd been less than a year ago. That frightened Omega, who'd been ready to die in a blizzard rather than face a life of abuse. That girl who'd stumbled upon a dying wolf and chosen to fight for both their lives despite having every reason to give up. That girl had been braver than she'd known, stronger than she'd believed, more valuable than she'd ever imagined. And now she was queen, mate to a king who loved her, carrying their child, leading reforms that would help countless other Omegas find the freedom and value she'd found. "You're thinking too hard," Rhys murmured in her ear. "I can see it in your face." "Just thinking about how far we've come," Cassandra replied. "From dying in the snow to this. Sometimes it doesn't feel real." "It's real," Rhys promised, "and it's only the beginning. We have a lifetime ahead of us, a lifetime of building the world we want to see, of raising our child to value compassion and strength equally, of being partners in every sense of the word." "That sounds perfect," Cassandra said. The feast continued long into the night, with wolves coming forward to offer congratulations and well wishes. And through it all, Cassandra held tight to Rhys's hand, grounded by his presence, strengthened by their bond. She had dragged a wounded wolf through the snow for 3 days, fighting to keep them both alive. She hadn't known she was saving her mate, her king, her future. She hadn't known that those 3 days of suffering would lead to more joy and purpose than she'd ever dreamed possible. But the moon goddess had known. She'd brought them together in the worst of circumstances to forge a bond strong enough to weather anything. And as Cassandra looked around at her new life, at the wolves who'd become her family, at the mate who'd become her everything, she sent up a silent prayer of thanks for that blizzard, for that moment of choosing compassion over survival, for every step that had led her here. She was no longer the Omega who'd run from her pack. She was Cassandra Ashford, Queen of the Northern Territories, mate to Rhys, mother of his child, and exactly where she was always meant to be. The story of the Omega, who dragged a wounded wolf through the snow for 3 days, would be told for generations. But Cassandra knew the real story wasn't about survival or royalty or destiny. It was about choosing kindness when cruelty would have been easier, about fighting for someone else when giving up would have been simpler, about discovering that sometimes the person you save saves you right back. And as she and Rhys slipped away from the feast to spend quiet time together, their hands intertwined, their bond humming contentedly between them, Cassandra knew that no matter what challenges the future held, they would face them together. 2 people who'd found each other in the midst of a blizzard and chosen again and again to keep choosing each other. That was the real magic, not the mate bond or royal status or prophecy. Just 2 souls recognizing each other and deciding that was enough. That was everything. Years passed, and the Northern Territories flourished under their rule. The reforms Cassandra had championed became the foundation of a new era where Omegas were valued for their strength rather than controlled for their designation. Packs that had once clung to old ways gradually transformed, inspired by the Queen, who had proven that compassion and courage were not weaknesses, but the greatest strengths a leader could possess. Their daughter was born on the first day of spring, with her father's golden eyes and her mother's white blonde hair. They named her Arya, for the songs Cassandra had sung to keep them both alive during those 3 frozen days. The child grew up hearing the story of how her parents met, how her mother had dragged a dying wolf through a blizzard without knowing he was a king, how love had bloomed in the harshest of circumstances. Arya was strong and kind in equal measure, a perfect blend of both parents. She trained with the guards alongside common-born children, learning early that rank meant responsibility, not superiority. She studied diplomacy with her mother and strategy with her father. And when she asked why they pushed her so hard, Cassandra would take her daughter's face in her hands and say, "Because someday you'll lead these people. And they deserve a queen who understands both strength and mercy." On their 5th anniversary, Rhys took Cassandra back to the place where everything had begun. The abandoned cabin still stood, weathered but intact, and the rock outcropping where she'd first found him was covered in spring wildflowers instead of snow. They stood together in silence, hands intertwined, remembering those desperate days. "Do you ever regret it?" Cassandra asked quietly. "Regret what? Coming out here alone that day? Getting attacked? Nearly dying?" She turned to look at him. "All the pain that brought us together?" Rhys pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist as he rested his chin on top of her head. "Not for a single moment. Every wound, every frozen hour, every second I thought might be my last, it was all worth it to find you, to build this life with you." Cassandra leaned back against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. I used to think I was broken. That being soft-hearted made me weak. That choosing compassion over self-preservation was foolish. You weren't broken, Reese said firmly. You were exactly what this world needed. What I needed. Your grandmother was right. Being soft-hearted isn't weakness. It's the bravery to remain kind in a cruel world. She smiled, thinking of the grandmother who had raised her, who had taught her that true strength came from the heart. I wish she could have met you, could have seen what became of the girl she worried was too gentle for this harsh world. She's watching, Reese assured her, and she's proud. They returned to the cabin, stepping inside the small space that had sheltered them both. Someone had maintained it over the years, keeping it clean and stocked, perhaps as a monument to the story that had changed the kingdom. The fireplace where Cassandra had built that life-saving fire still stood. The floor where she'd tended Reese's wounds was worn smooth. This place saved us, Cassandra said softly. This small, forgotten cabin in the middle of nowhere became the birthplace of everything we built together. We saved each other, Reese corrected. The cabin just gave us the space to do it. That night, they made love in front of the fireplace, their bodies intertwining with the practiced ease of 5 years together. But there was still magic in it. Still that electric spark that came from knowing this person had chosen you, had fought for you, had seen you at your absolute worst, and loved you anyway. Afterward, wrapped in blankets and firelight, Cassandra traced the scars on Reese's side, the marks left by the attack that had nearly taken him from her before she'd ever known him. These nearly cost me everything, she whispered. These scars gave me everything, Reese countered, catching her hand and pressing it to his heart. They brought me to you. Back at the palace, their life continued in a rhythm they'd built together. Mornings began with training, not just for Cassandra now, but for the young wolves she was teaching. She'd created a program for Omegas who wanted to learn self-defense, proving that designation didn't determine strength. Afternoons were filled with council meetings and diplomatic sessions where Cassandra sat beside Reese as an equal partner in leadership. She'd grown from the frightened girl who didn't know how to be queen into a ruler who commanded respect through wisdom and compassion. Evenings belonged to their family. Arya would burst into their chambers with stories from her day, and they'd sit together reviewing her lessons or simply enjoying each other's company. These quiet moments, Reese often said, were his favorite. No politics, no performances, just being Reese and Cassandra and Arya. One evening, as they tucked Arya into bed, their daughter asked a question that made them both pause. Mama, do you think the moon goddess planned everything? That storm, Papa getting hurt, you finding him? Do you think she knew? Cassandra exchanged a glance with Reese, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. I think, she said carefully, that the moon goddess gives us opportunities. She puts us in places where we can choose who we want to be, but the choices are still ours to make. So you chose to save Papa? Arya pressed, even though you didn't know who he was? Especially because I didn't know who he was, Cassandra replied. I chose to help because it was the right thing to do, not because of what I might gain from it. And that, Reese added, ruffling his daughter's hair, is why your mother is the best queen these territories have ever had. She leads with her heart. After Arya fell asleep, Cassandra and Reese stood on their private balcony overlooking the kingdom. Lights twinkled in the valley below, each one representing families and lives that depended on their leadership. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, Cassandra admitted, that the girl who was ready to die in a snowstorm is now standing here looking out over an entire kingdom. You're not that girl anymore, Reese said. She grew into someone even stronger, someone who uses her pain to prevent others from suffering the same way, someone who turns trauma into triumph, We've changed so much, Cassandra mused, both of us, from two people who'd given up on life to two people building a better world. And we're just getting started, Rhys promised. Arya will grow up seeing what real partnership looks like. She'll lead with both strength and compassion because she learned from the best. Our reforms will continue spreading. The world we're building will outlast us. Cassandra leaned into him, feeling the mate bond hum contentedly between them, as strong now as it had been that first moment in the snow. You know what I'm most grateful for? What? Not the crown or the palace or the power. I'm grateful that on the worst day of my life, when I was ready to give up, I found you. I'm grateful that I chose compassion over convenience. I'm grateful that 3 days of suffering led to a lifetime of joy. I'm grateful, too, Rhys whispered against her hair. Grateful that an Omega with a heart too big for her own good refused to let a dying wolf give up. Grateful that you talked to me like I mattered when you thought no one was listening. Grateful that you chose me, chose us, chose this life we built together. They stood there until the moon rose high, casting silver light over the mountains. The same moon that had watched over them during those desperate days in the blizzard. The same moon that had witnessed the formation of a bond that would change an entire kingdom. Inside, their daughter slept peacefully, dreaming of the day she'd lead these people with the wisdom her parents had taught her. Throughout the kingdom, Omegas slept safely, protected by laws that valued them as equals. And in the Northern Palace, two souls who had saved each other continued their dance, partners in every sense, proving that sometimes the greatest love stories begin in the darkest moments, when one person refuses to let another face the cold alone. The story of Cassandra and Rhys became legend, passed down through generations. Children grew up hearing about the Omega who dragged a wounded wolf through snow for 3 days, not knowing she was saving a king. Young wolves learned that true strength came from compassion, that choosing kindness was always brave, that the most powerful thing you could do was refuse to let someone suffer alone. And every year, on the anniversary of the day they met, Cassandra and Rhys would return to that cabin in the woods. They'd light a fire in the old fireplace and sit together, remembering how close they'd come to never finding each other, remembering how 3 days of desperate survival had given them everything they'd never dared to dream of. Because that was the real magic, not destiny or prophecy or the moon goddess's plan. Just two broken people who chose to fight for each other when giving up would have been easier. Just two souls who recognized something precious in the midst of chaos and refused to let it slip away. Just love, born in a blizzard that burned brighter than any fire and warmer than any hearth. That was their story. That was their triumph. That was everything. 10 years after that fateful blizzard, the Northern Territories had become a beacon of progress throughout the Wolf Territories. Other kingdoms sent emissaries to study their reforms, to understand how an Omega Queen had transformed not just laws, but hearts and minds. Cassandra's name was spoken with reverence, not because of her title, but because of the bridges she'd built between classes that had been separated for generations. Arya was now 10 years old, a spirited child who moved between the palace and the common quarters with equal ease. She'd inherited her mother's compassion, but tempered it with her father's strategic mind, a combination that promised to make her an exceptional leader someday. But she was still young enough to climb into her parents' bed during thunderstorms, still innocent enough to believe that love could fix anything, still curious enough to ask endless questions about the world. One morning, as spring rain pattered against the palace windows, Arya found her mother in the royal library, surrounded by correspondence from various packs. "Mama," she said, settling into the chair beside Cassandra's desk, "Lady Lyra told me something yesterday. She said that before you became queen, Omegas in some packs weren't allowed to choose their own mates. Is that true?" Cassandra set down her quill, giving her daughter her full attention. "It's true. In many packs, Omegas were seen as property, traded or given away without any say in their own futures." "But that's horrible," Arya breathed, her golden eyes wide with shock. "Didn't anyone try to stop it?" "Some tried," Cassandra said gently, "but changing old ways is difficult. When those in power benefit from keeping things as they are, it takes courage to stand against tradition, and often the people suffering the most are the ones with the least power to change things." "Is that why you made the new laws? To give Omegas power?" Cassandra smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of white blonde hair behind her daughter's ear. "I made the laws because I remembered what it felt like to be powerless, to have my entire future decided by others who saw me as less than them. And I decided that if I had the power to change that, even a little, I had to try." Arya was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she asked, "Were you scared when you ran away from your old pack?" "Terrified," Cassandra admitted. "Every day I was running, I was afraid. Afraid I'd be caught and dragged back. Afraid I'd die alone in the cold. Afraid that I was making a terrible mistake and throwing away the only life I'd ever known, even if it was painful. But you kept going anyway," Arya said, "even though you were scared. Because sometimes," Cassandra explained, "being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. I could have stayed in my old pack, accepted the life they wanted for me, and been miserable but safe. Or I could run toward an uncertain future and hope for something better." Rhys entered the library then, his hair damp from training. He'd been working with a group of young alphas, teaching them that strength without honor was just brutality. He crossed to Cassandra and dropped a kiss on top of her head before ruffling Arya's hair. "What are my two favorite people discussing so seriously?" "Arya was asking about my life before I met you," Cassandra said, "about why I ran away." Rhys pulled up a chair, joining their circle. "It's an important story, one you should know well, Arya, because it's part of who you are. Your mother's courage didn't start when she found me in that blizzard. It started long before, when she decided her life belonged to her, not to anyone else. I wish I could have been there," Arya said wistfully. "Could have helped Mama when she was alone and scared." "You help her every day," Rhys assured his daughter. "Every time you're kind to someone others overlook, every time you stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, you're honoring the courage your mother showed. You're proving that her choice to run, to fight, to survive, meant something." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the library door. A messenger entered, bowing respectfully before addressing Rhys. "Your Majesty, we've received word from the Eastern Territories. Alpha Kirin requests an audience. He wishes to discuss implementing similar Omega protections in his territory." Cassandra and Rhys exchanged glances, years of partnership allowing them to communicate without words. This was the kind of meeting that could shift the balance of power across multiple territories, expanding their reforms beyond the Northern Kingdom. "Show him to the council chambers," Rhys instructed. "We'll meet with him within the hour." After the messenger left, Arya looked between her parents with understanding beyond her years. "This is because of you, isn't it, Mama? Because other alphas are seeing that treating everyone fairly makes kingdoms stronger, not weaker." Cassandra felt pride bloom in her chest. "You're exactly right. Change spreads slowly, but it spreads. Every alpha who adopts these protections makes it easier for the next one to do the same. Someday, hopefully before you take the throne, these protections won't be progressive or unusual. They'll just be the way things are done." "Can I sit in on the meeting?" Arya asked eagerly. I want to learn how to talk to other alphas, how to convince them to do the right thing. Reese considered his daughter thoughtfully. You may observe, but you must remain silent unless directly addressed. Watching and learning is how you'll understand the complexities of leadership. Later that day, as they sat in the council chambers with Alpha Kieran, a grizzled wolf who'd ruled the Eastern Territories for 30 years, Cassandra watched her daughter absorb every word, every gesture, every subtle negotiation tactic. Kieran was direct in his approach, which Cassandra appreciated. I won't pretend I've always treated Omegas well, he said, his weathered face showing genuine regret. I grew up believing they were weaker, meant to be protected and controlled. But I've watched your kingdom flourish, Queen Cassandra. I've seen Omegas in your guard, in your council, thriving in ways I never thought possible. And I've realized my beliefs were wrong. Admitting that takes strength, Cassandra said gently. Many alphas would rather cling to old ways than acknowledge they were mistaken. My daughter is an Omega, Kieran continued, and his voice cracked slightly. She's 16 now, and last month a pack alpha twice her age tried to claim her without her consent. I stopped it, but the incident made me realize I'd built a system where she isn't safe, where her future is determined by her designation rather than her choices. I want to change that before it's too late. Over the next several hours, they discussed implementation strategies, potential resistance, ways to educate rather than simply mandate change. Arya watched silently, but Cassandra could see her daughter's mind working, absorbing lessons that no book could teach. When Kieran finally left, promising to return in 3 months with a full proposal, Arya turned to her mother. He changed his mind because of his daughter, because it became personal. That's often how real change happens, Cassandra confirmed. People can ignore abstract injustice, but when it affects someone they love, it becomes impossible to look away. Your grandfather in the Clearwater Pack probably never thought about Omega rights until I was old enough to be bartered away. Then suddenly it was convenient for him to profit from those outdated rules. Do you think he ever regretted it? Arya asked. Letting you go? Cassandra considered the question honestly. I don't know. Part of me hopes he did, that somewhere in his heart he recognized the cruelty of what he was doing. But I've learned that some people are so locked into their beliefs that they can't see past them, even when faced with the harm they cause. That evening, as Cassandra and Reese prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about her old pack, something she rarely allowed herself to do. Do you ever wonder what happened to them? She asked Reese. The Clearwater Pack, after you left? Sometimes, Reese admitted, pulling her close. I've had reports over the years. Your aunt is still there, still running things much as she always did. The beta they tried to match you with eventually mated with another Omega, though by all accounts it's not a happy union. The pack has declined in influence and numbers. Many young wolves have left for territories with better opportunities, so my running away had consequences beyond just me. In ways you couldn't have predicted, Reese agreed. Your courage inspired others to question their circumstances. Several Omegas from Clearwater have relocated to our territory over the years, citing you as their reason for believing escape was possible. Do you think I should reach out to them? Cassandra asked. Let them know I forgive them for how they treated me? Reese was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Forgiveness is something you give for your own peace, not for theirs. If reaching out would bring you closure, then do it. But you don't owe them absolution, Cassandra. They made choices that could have killed you. The fact that you survived and thrived despite them doesn't erase their responsibility. You're right, Cassandra said, settling against his chest. I think I've been holding on to this idea that if I forgave them publicly, it would somehow prove I'm not bitter or broken by what happened. But I don't need to prove that to anyone. My life, our life, is proof enough. They lay in comfortable silence, the mate bond humming contentedly between them. Outside, the spring rain had given way to clear skies, stars visible through their chamber windows. "You know what I was thinking today?" Cassandra murmured. "During the meeting with Kieran? What's that? That girl who was running through the snow 10 years ago, desperate and afraid. She never could have imagined this. Never could have dreamed she'd be sitting in a council chamber, negotiating reforms with alphas from other territories. Never could have believed she'd have a daughter asking thoughtful questions about justice and courage. Never could have known she'd find you." "Life has a way of surprising us," Reese said softly. "The worst moments can lead to the best outcomes. Those 3 days in the blizzard were the most painful, terrifying days of my life, but they gave me everything that matters." "They gave us everything," Cassandra corrected. "A kingdom that's more just, a daughter who will lead with both strength and heart, a partnership that makes us both better than we were alone." The next morning brought news that complicated their peaceful evening. A messenger arrived from the Clearwater Pack, bearing a letter sealed with the Pack's official mark. Cassandra stared at the envelope for a long moment before breaking the seal. The letter was from her aunt, written in the same precise handwriting Cassandra remembered from her childhood. The words were formal, almost cold, but the message was clear. The Clearwater Pack was struggling. Several families had left for other territories. The beta who'd been meant to mate with Cassandra had proven to be a poor leader, driving away talented wolves with his cruelty. Her aunt was writing to request aid, to ask if the Northern Kingdom might provide resources or guidance. There was no apology in the letter, no acknowledgement of how they'd treated Cassandra, just a request for help from a position of weakness. Reese read the letter over her shoulder, his expression darkening. "They have considerable audacity, asking for your help after what they did to you." "They're desperate," Cassandra said quietly, "and desperate people make requests they'd never make otherwise." "Do you want to help them?" "Because you don't owe them anything, Cassandra. No one would blame you for refusing." Cassandra walked to the window, looking out over the kingdom she'd helped build. "If I refuse, I'm acting out of revenge. If I help, I'm acting out of principle. The question is, which person do I want to be?" "The person you've always been," Reese said, coming to stand beside her. "Compassionate, even when it's not deserved. But compassion doesn't mean accepting abuse or pretending the past didn't happen. You can help them while still maintaining boundaries." By mid-afternoon, Cassandra had composed her response. She would send advisors to help restructure the Clearwater Pack's leadership, would offer refuge to any Omegas who wished to relocate to the Northern Territories, and would provide resources to help the Pack stabilize. But she also made clear that this aid came with conditions. The Pack would implement the same Omega protections that governed the Northern Kingdom, would submit to oversight to ensure compliance, and would publicly acknowledge their past failures. Her aunt's response came within a week, accepting all conditions with what Cassandra suspected was great reluctance. But acceptance was acceptance, regardless of motivation. Over the following months, Cassandra watched as the Clearwater Pack slowly transformed. It wasn't easy. Old wolves clung to old ways, and there was significant resistance. But gradually, change took root. Young Omegas, who'd been resigned to limited futures, began training for positions of leadership. Forced matings became illegal and punishable. The Pack, while still smaller than it had been, began to stabilize. Aurea watched the process with fascination, asking her mother countless questions about forgiveness, justice, and the complicated balance between the two. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens together, Aurea voiced a thought that had clearly been troubling her. "Mama, if the Clearwater Pack had treated you well, if they'd let you choose your own path, would you have ever met Papa? Would I exist?" Cassandra stopped walking, pulling her daughter close? That's a question I can't answer, because we can't know what might have been in a different world. But I can tell you this: every choice, every hardship, every moment of fear and courage led me to where I am now. And I wouldn't trade this life, wouldn't trade you or your father for anything. Even if it meant not suffering, Arya pressed, even if you could go back and make everything easy from the start? Especially then, Cassandra said firmly, because suffering taught me things that ease never could. It taught me empathy for others who hurt. It taught me that I was stronger than I believed. It taught me that choosing compassion, even when you've been treated cruelly, is the hardest and most important kind of strength. Years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their story. Cassandra and Rhys grew older together, silver threading through their hair, laugh lines deepening around their eyes. But the mate bond remained as strong as ever. That golden thread that had formed in the midst of a blizzard, still connecting their hearts. Arya grew into a young woman who embodied everything her parents had hoped for. Strong and compassionate, strategic and kind. She moved through the world with quiet confidence that came from being raised by parents who'd shown her what real partnership looked like. On Cassandra's 40th birthday, the kingdom threw a celebration unlike any they'd seen before. Wolves from every territory came to honor the queen who'd transformed not just laws, but entire worldviews. Omegas who'd found freedom because of her reforms traveled from distant packs to share their stories. Alphas who'd learned to lead with compassion rather than dominance came to pay their respects. And through it all, Cassandra held tight to Rhys's hand, grounded by the same presence that had kept her anchored for 15 years. They'd built something remarkable together, something that would outlast them both. That night, after the festivities had ended, and they'd retreated to their private chambers, Rhys pulled out a small box he'd been hiding for weeks. Inside was a necklace, delicate silver, shaped into the silhouette of a wolf, curled protectively around an Omega symbol. "I wanted you to have something," he said, as he fastened it around her neck, "that represented both parts of you. The wolf you saved and the Omega you were. The queen you became, and the woman you've always been." Cassandra touched the pendant, tears streaming down her face. 15 years, she whispered. 15 years since I found you dying in the snow. Since I made the choice to fight for both of us, instead of giving up. "Best decision I ever made," Rhys murmured against her hair. "Best decision either of us ever made." And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms with the mate bond glowing warm and steady between them, Cassandra knew that every hardship, every moment of fear, every impossible choice had been worth it. Because that girl in the blizzard, desperate and afraid, had become a woman who'd changed the world. And that dying wolf had become a king who'd learned that true strength came from the partnership they'd forged in the coldest of circumstances. Their story wasn't finished. It would continue through Arya, through the reforms that would outlast them, through every Omega who chose courage over compliance because they'd seen that a different future was possible. But in this moment, in this quiet space between heartbeats, they had everything they'd ever needed, each other, and the life they'd built from 3 days of desperate survival and a lifetime of choosing love. That was their legacy. That was their triumph. That was everything that mattered.